Young people are saying that they're learning that leadership is about influence, not control. Particularly when we look at our leadership landscape, often that's confused and we associate leadership with just having control and people listen to us and that's how it works. They're realizing they don't need to have a badge in order to have influence. It's just having that influence in their spaces.
The way that we design our keynote speaker lineup is through every single intention of like, what's the objective we want to achieve? And I think the story that they tell is allowing young people to start to realize that vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability is a superpower.
Big leadership learning takeaways is something we saw commented on so much was, oh, hang on, leadership isn't just about being at the top. It's not about being the best. It's about the journey. It is embracing your courage and choosing to be ready rather than waiting to feel ready. Podclass acknowledges the traditional and true custodians of the land we meet on here today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We're grateful to be here.
So no one told you teaching was gonna be this way. Your lesson plans are jokes, your patience broke, you're feeling in disarray. It's like you're always stuck in report writing, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your school year. But I'll be here for you.
When the students start to riot,
I'll be here for you.
even if your coffee is gone cold,
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Hello friends, welcome back to Podclass. My name is Will and I'm here with my friends.
Hello, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Sky. Hello.
Are so excited to be back for another week, and this is the one on what young people need.
Ooh,
Yes.
such a good topic. And I feel like one that in this very moment, in this very week right now, Will, you are so qualified to talk about because you've spent some time with some young people
We have
recently.
indeed. Wildler Youth Leadership Academy Australia, the organisation that I am the CEO of and founded 7 years ago, just wrapped up our 6th national tour with 11,500 young people across 5 cities and 10 events and it was like 820 schools or something.
Wow.
So
Wild.
crazy. And you also hit a huge milestone, which was,
we
of
did.
course,
Yes,
announced in your
literally last
tour
week.
date. How many young people, Wilson?
51,000 young people have now been supported by Wildler to lead their schools, and it just I never really expected it to be here. But the stories and what we're hearing from young people now and today are so different to what it was 7 years ago, and it's so important for us as an organisation to continue to listen to what young people need, and also for us to share the insights almost of what we learned from spending such a long time with so many young people from not only the metro areas, but so far regional. We had schools fly to events and it just blows me away.
Mhm. Or like wake up at early hours to drive 3-4 hours or travel the day before. And so I feel like before we jump in and we really share some of the themes that came out of the national tour, it would be great to share a little context around what it actually looks like, because I'm sure for some people, I know for me, when you hear that, oh, in the last month, we've been across 5 cities, spent time with 11,500 young people. And so what does that actually look like, and how do we elicit and how do we know what young people need based on having spent that time with them?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll giving like a bit of context as to what tour actually looks like. So I'm a young person. I go to a high school or a primary school. My teacher has booked for me to go along to the Wildler conference. What am I walking into?
A lot of uncertainty. I think the space that we try and create for the young people is a space where they can understand their leadership potential regardless of who they are, what badge they've been given, or what they've been labelled before that. And the way that we do that is through a series of keynote speakers who I think provide inspiration to the young people, and then tangible leadership skills for them to take back into their schools. So now that they're inspired from the keynote speakers, our Wildler facilitators have spent 6 months designing tangible content that they can then take into their schools. And the entire goal is, by the end of the day, the young people feel not only empowered to create change, but also equipped to create change in whether it be their lives or their schools or their communities.
And Wildler itself becomes a community, because you're walking in and it's not just like it's just your school that's there. You're walking in and you might be sitting in a room at the International Convention Centre in Sydney or the Melbourne Exhibition Convention.
It was so wild.
Yeah.
Literally.
And it's like you've got 2,000 young people sitting in a room together.
And I think nothing the first event that I went out on break was literally event number 10, our last event. And it was so epic to just see so many schools that were just like, every group of people were just like all these different uniforms. And I think the community element came in when Amanda was there as well, and there was a dance circle happening. You were there, Sky, and Amanda's just walking around with a boombox, and there's now probably 500 young people singing together in the break.
By the end of it, it was 1,000 young people. I mean, I was almost expecting Melbourne Convention Centre to kick us out at that point. It was the entire foyer of young people singing and dancing together. And I think, you know, that might sound a bit odd because everyone walks into the room with their school group and with their peers that they've come with, and they walk in not knowing each other, and they're sitting there and they have some 1,900 other young people there that they don't know. And so it is through the curation of the content, through the
Every single minute is planned.
Every single minute is planned. Every single element is planned. And it is all planned to build this connection, build this gradient, and empower and inspire and provide tangible skills so that young people feel capable of connecting with other young people, of thinking about what does my school community need and how can I address that and what is the process for addressing that. So I guess that kind of provides a bit of context into, well, hang on, these are one-day events. How do we elicit what young people are needing right now from a one-day event? But it's actually highly immersive. We gather a lot of feedback. We hear from a lot of young voices. And so we've really noticed some themes across the country.
Yeah. And I think like we take feedback very seriously. So we've almost, whether it be the conversations that we have or the feedback we receive from teachers or the feedback we receive from students, it's like looking at all of that and seeing the themes that have sort of existed out of this. We started by looking at like, what are the biggest learnings that young people are being like, oh, this is important for me to know, and they haven't learned it anywhere else before.
Yeah. So these are their biggest personal learnings. So this comes from student feedback. This comes from conversations. This comes from what they're writing down and like all of this stuff throughout the conference. So if we look at one of the first biggest personal learnings, and that is that young people are saying that they're learning that leadership is about influence, not control. And I think particularly when we look at our leadership landscape, whether that's here in Australia or globally, often that's confused and we associate leadership with just having control and people listen to us and that's how it works. And I think they're realizing they don't need to have a badge in order to have influence. They don't need to be the person that's the nominated school captain, that they can, as leaders, it's just having that influence in their spaces.
And I think we're starting to see a shift also, like the way that we design our keynote speaker lineup is through every single intention of like what's the objective we want to achieve. And I think the story that they tell is allowing young people to start to realize that vulnerability is not a weakness.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is a superpower.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we see that a lot from Gen Z in general, is demanding that level of authenticity from our systems, from our brands, from our communities. But that was hundreds of young people from across the country shared that was their biggest learning. Vulnerability is power. Self-awareness is power. And actually to stand in the authenticity of who I am makes me the most effective leader I could ever be.
Yeah. And off the back of that, it really speaks to that piece. Like young people are hungry for that growth. They're really willing to step out of their comfort zones and to start taking those risks and really learning that it's more about having courage than it is about maybe having certainty of an outcome. Because if we're expecting certainty, and this is what we're hearing from our young leaders, if they're expecting certainty, then there's no guarantee that they'll take that step. Whereas if they just choose to step into courage, then suddenly they're like, I can do this. I'm going to use my influence. I'm going to wear my vulnerability and I can be a leader.
Yeah. And so the theme, I guess, with those big leadership learning takeaways is something we saw commented on so much was, oh, hang on, leadership isn't just about being at the top. It's not about being the best. It's not about like winning the accolade or wearing the badge. Sure, those are elements of leadership at times, but it's about the journey. And that sounds so cliche, oh my goodness, but like
Nothing wrong with a good cliche.
Every single one of us knows like what actually made you, like sitting here today in this moment, what is it that contributed to the essence of who you are, to the essence of your leadership? It is that journey. It is standing in your vulnerability. It is embracing your courage and choosing to be ready rather than waiting to feel ready, because we never feel ready. There's always going to be elements of uncertainty. And so embracing the journey and knowing that if you reach the top or get the award or get a badge, that's great. But regardless, your leadership is power.
Yeah.
So what does that actually mean, right? Simon, I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, I'm listening to this and I'm like, that's great. My students got to go along to a YLAR conference, or they didn't, and I'm really keen to bring them in 2026. But what does this actually mean for in the classroom? Or how can I support my students knowing that this is what their learnings are and what they're thinking about leadership?
I think the biggest thing I also struggle with is like, I have been on a personal development journey myself, and I forget that these things that sometimes seem like obvious or that we should all know them, we forget that young people are growing up in a world where they're being told completely different things. So I think by providing a space in the classroom where you value that self-awareness, that growth from within, so just as much as their academic growth, allows you to have students who are curious, who are learners, who are leaders in the classroom.
And I think another element is, rather than framing leadership as a reward, framing it as a responsibility and an innate quality that we can grow through application of tools and strategies. And this comes back to our age-old external motivation is not the most powerful motivation. And if we take that out, if we take, the carrot being dangled in front or the stick being, threatened behind, if we take those away, then the motivation's gone. Intrinsic motivation and an internal sense and commitment to leadership development is stronger. So rather than framing leadership as a reward for our young people, what we can do is connect into what is your essence of leadership instead, and how does that look, and acknowledging how that looks in practice is seeing the small moments and acknowledging it. Because leadership, I believe the best leadership occurs in the little moments. It's in the check-ins. It's in the having eyes to see. It's in the sharing an opinion. It's in the contributing something in a space or supporting someone else. It's those little moments. And so if we're seeing that occur, feel free to name it as leadership. That was incredible leadership with that individual right there. Or I noticed you just really pushed yourself out of your comfort zone. You showed a lot of courage. That was incredible leadership. And then it starts to frame up to our young people as well that leadership isn't a reward for only 3 members of the year level, but it's available and accessible to us at all moments.
Love that. Reinforcing the badged versus not badged. 101.
101.
So we know that these are our biggest learnings, right, from students. So what is it that young people want more of? What do students want more of in their school communities, in life, in leadership? What do they need?
I have to go back to the dance circle, because the dance circle represents community. And the reason why they were so excited by it was because of the connection, right?
Yeah.
We know that young people are more disconnected than ever before, but also digitally connected. But that real authentic connection, that sometimes we just need to create space for them to do that.
They just want to know that they're not alone. And shout out, yesterday I connected with a couple of students who had attended the conference completely by themselves.
Yes.
So the school had given permission for them to go. They were unattended by a teacher. They were Year 12 students. Didn't have a teacher accompanying them. And they had they'd found the opportunity. They'd pitched it to the schools. The schools had gone, yep, we're happy to support your attendance. And they had rolled in with 2,000 other people, not knowing a single other person in the room. And I think not only is that insane leadership and insane courage, but for me, it's just like more evidence that these young leaders are craving that connection and that sense of community and finding like-minded individuals that they can find a place with.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite a broad sweeping comment to say young people want more connection and community, and that, yes, is in more demand now than ever before, but is also an always theme for young people, regardless of what time.
The old people, not even young people.
Exactly, all people. And I think something to note here in practice is, yes, we want to create more connection and community, but as the leaders, the teachers, the facilitators guiding young people, providing permission and at times scaffolding to support nurturing that connection and community is really, really powerful. So if we take the dance circle for a moment, what we did to support that is all the young people have gone out for the break and we had set up an activity of networking bingo and challenged young people to connect with other young people from different schools, from different communities, to ask different questions. And so the energy was already buzzing. Then we bring in a speaker and we start small and we invite them in, giving permission to come in, connect community. And there's like this tipping point, right? Where there's a whole lot of people watching and every person wants to be a part of the buzz, but they're just waiting for enough people to be there for it to be safe. And then suddenly we have 1,000 people joining in. And what was our role in that? Just providing a little bit of scaffolding to nurture the community and connection. And so I think that's also what we can be doing in schools and in classrooms.
Because I think if you just saying, go out and talk to a different school is not going to work.
No.
Yeah, no.
I would be like, "Brr." I would not be, it would just be not happening, right? Like, but then there's a minor incentive. We didn't even say what the prize was for the bingo.
I think we gave a bag of lollies, to be honest. It was not about the incentive at all.
No, but it may have got the buy-in for that initial moment. But once you get that buy-in, it's like, oh, this is actually like we're moving. We're meeting people and that connection is built.
Which is a beautiful example that they're intrinsically motivated to connect with one another. And it wasn't about the reward or ticking off the networking bingo box, you know? I think the other thing that's came up and that young people really want more of, students want more of, is that authenticity, transparency, honesty piece. And we know already how important that is for Gen Z. But like young people, they're not stupid, right? They don't need to see or be positioned in front of keynote speakers or founders or whoever it is that just show their highlight reel of their life and that everything's all been, you know, roses and butterflies and dandelions.
It's never been a struggle or a challenge or I've never been scared or anything like that.
No, they want that authenticity.
And I think not many people understand like how well we can read it as well, especially like digitally, because some older demographics, some boomers often like posted ChatGPT posts on Facebook and you just know it's ChatGPT because we know it's ChatGPT. But from their perspective,
it's the hyphen. It's the ChatGPT hyphen.
It's like we have no idea, right?
Yeah.
But we look at it and we're like, well, that was silly.
And you disconnect because it feels authentic. Because straight away you're like, well, they didn't write it. So how am I supposed to connect with that person that's sitting
hilariously, it was a politician. It's like, you're not going to build trust that way.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so we've considered what are the biggest learnings from having spent time with 11,000 young people? What are students wanting more of in our learning spaces and in life? And now let's look at where are our students at emotionally, because these are some of the big conversations we had as well. You know, it's not just this, it wasn't just base level, it's not just base level conversations. We have conversations about where are we at emotionally.
And I guess one of the biggest emerging like problems that young people identified in their schools and in their communities was bullying. It was something that came up in primary school events, in secondary school events, as being a real issue in communities. And I guess that speaks to, I mean, when you really begin to unpack that with the young people that are in the space, they're talking about it not just surface level, like they were mean to me or whatever it is, but they're really aware of this judgment that exists, these biases that people might hold, and this real fear to step out and be that person who maybe speaks up and supports the people that are struggling.
Yeah. And the other thing that popped up in relation to that was like, obviously the world has some big issues going on with climate crisis, all of the crisis that for many of them that they feel like if they're getting bullied, it's like not worthy of that same level of concern.
Yeah.
And that's why like we are always going to talk about bullying forever. However, with more issues, it's like bullying goes down the list and no longer like valued as much as something else.
Yeah, it's like how could you be worried about this when look at what's happening around the world? But no, we like minimizing.
And this goes back to being heard as a young person.
Yeah, minimizing those things is never the answer. And in fact, when we go down to that grassroots level and we address maybe it is fear of judgment that is causing young people to be like, everyone has fear of judgment, and maybe being scared of being judged as a protective mechanism, what young people often do is judge others, and it kind of guards them and shields them from feeling that fear of judgment for themselves, even though they are feeling it so deeply.
Yeah.
So how do we support, enhance, encourage the self-belief and the self-understanding and self-awareness and also normalizing the fear of failure, normalizing the fear of judgment. These are human things. As leaders in the space, it's okay sometimes to, if we're unpacking a concept and we're noticing a dynamic going on, or we're sharing a story, to talk to the fact that this comes up for all humans, because it's kind of like an elephant in the room. And if we don't address it, it can just get bigger and bigger.
I think it also speaks to, and we have to acknowledge, like, shout out to our young people. They are navigating such a complex world.
Oh boy.
And I think what you spoke to just before, Will, around this idea of being like, oh, well, I'm experiencing bullying, but this is also happening on a global scale across the world. And so what I'm experiencing, like, I should minimize that because it's not as important. Like that, even to have that thought process and to be able to reflect on that as a young person just shows the emotional complexity that they're dealing with every single day. And as educators, I think we can acknowledge that and go like, we get that this is a complex world. But that doesn't mean that if you're experiencing something and it feels like a 10 out of 10 for you today, like we need to show up and treat that like it's a 10 out of 10. Because the second that we minimize, or the second that we go, oh, we'll get some perspective because there's actually bigger problems going on in the world, suddenly we're shutting down that young person. We're making them feel less than. They're less likely to speak up. And we know that what can happen in terms of mental health when we are not giving space for young people to be seen and heard and met exactly where they are.
And that's the theme that we're seeing on the back of that, is young people not feeling worthy. Young people not feeling like they have a voice or that they can use their voice. And what that, like so many conversations that I had on tour was, how do I be heard by my teachers? How do I be heard by my principals? Because they just keep saying no.
Yeah. So we need to make space. I think as educators, like that takes the priority. Like we know that if a young person's coming in and they're in one of those spaces, or maybe there's something going on or there's a big issue that's happening for them, they're not going to be in a state of optimal learning anyway.
No.
Our time is much better spent having that conversation, so then we can move into the things that we need to get on with.
One of my favorite lines from the event that we witnessed and from the event that you ran across the country was said by one of your lead facilitators, Liam O'Connell. And he shared with all of the people in the room, the best leaders don't just lead, they listen.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a snippet from our listening with young people. Yeah. And I think our biggest encouragement we could give is that we are doing a great job, but also creating space and setting up emotional safety and listening is really powerful and important. It doesn't mean we have to act on every single thing, and not every single thing is going to be possible, but just through listening, we so often reduce the struggle that the young person might be in.
What a nice way to end. Leaders don't just lead, they listen. Liam
Thank
O'Connell.
you so much for listening and leading in your classrooms and your spaces for young people.
Come in 2026 if you didn't come this year. This is your personal invitation from Wilson. See you soon.
This is Podclass, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Thanks so much for tuning into Podclass. If you've enjoyed this episode, we would adore it if you could go on to Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. 5 stars would be lovely. We would love to get this podcast into as many ears as possible so we can help and support as many people as possible who help young people. And if you're not already doing so, please go along to Instagram and follow us at podclass.aus.